Hello and welcome to episode number 17 of Chel Squared. I'm your host, Andrew Chelney, and oh man, do we have a special show for you today. Before we get started, please make sure to follow the podcast on Twitter at Chel Squared and on Facebook at Chel Squared. For more hot takes, news about future guests, poll questions, and a whole lot more, please rate the show on iTunes if you enjoy listening. It means a lot to me. And every time you either like the show on SoundCloud or give it a rating on iTunes, a puppy gets a hug from its owner. I don't make the rules, just spreading knowledge here. This week's show is all about the first 8 days or so of the regular season. We've got a bunch of topics lined up today, including the Rangers' terrible starts of the year and how Coach Quinn is adjusting to that in his first week or so as a NHL head coach in the regular season anyway. We'll talk Hurricanes currently sitting on top of the NHL standings. We'll talk Pittsburgh's goalie situation with Matt Murray out with a concussion, his third at age 24. We'll talk the poll question, of course. We'll talk Capitals Cup quote-unquote hangover, which, doesn't exist. Have you watched them play? They don't have a hangover. They are looking real good right now. And a whole lot more. Here with me to argue Hurricanes and everything I just listed off is Hurricanes mega fan and defenseman for the Syracuse University men's hockey team and one half of the Bar Southeast podcast, Ford Hatchett. Ford, how you doing?
I am doing quite all right. Thank you for the very kind intro.
Absolutely. Before we start the show, I want to congratulate the team on its 2-0 start, the sweep against number 20 URI. You guys were ranked number 25 last week before the sweep, and are now sitting number 22 heading into the two games against Liberty. Ford got an apple in the second game last week. Syracuse was down 3-1. Then Hatchett got the assist on the second goal, and then with 5 minutes left in the game, Syracuse head coach Connor Tracy called a timeout. I texted you a couple days ago asking you what Tracy said. You didn't say anything, so that's fair, secrecy. And then from those 5 minutes, Syracuse scored 2 quick goals and then rallied back to win 4-3. Ford, you got an assist, and are you ready to light the ACHA blaze here, or what's going on?
I think so. Wow, you take very detailed notes. I'm impressed. You got the whole game recap. You remember this better than I did.
I wrote about it. Yeah,
that's true. But I am going to stay sworn to secrecy here on the timeout message that Coach Tracy sent. That's never leaving the vault.
That's fair. That's fair. So before we get started, I tweeted out right after the Yankees lost to the Red Sox, and the Red Sox advanced, of course. I tweeted out that the Rangers aren't good, the Islanders aren't good, the Giants aren't good, the Knicks aren't good, the Nets aren't good, the Jets aren't good, the Bills aren't good, and the Sabres aren't good. So who are New York sports fans turning to? I tweeted that, not thinking that this is going to be a big deal or anything. I might get a few responses here and there. The New Jersey Devils Twitter account found this tweet and then quote tweeted it with a thinking emoji. Here's the thing. First of all, I said New York teams for a reason, New Jersey. I said New York teams. Also, I then replied to myself and said I am now a Metropolitan Riveters fan account, the NWHL team. We are now super into the Riveters on Twitter. The Devils fans were not happy with me. Islanders fans weren't happy with me. They were tweeting at me, oh, the Islanders are 2-1. They're doing well. Hold on. You played 3 games. Can we relax and get it together here? 3 games you played, and you're tweeting me how well you're doing. Let's hold off until maybe December, January, February, and then we could have a discussion about it. Saying after 3 games that the Islanders are good is not accurate. The lineup is bad. You could win 2 of the 3 games. That's fine. There was a pretty good win against San Jose the other day. But at the end of the day, it's 3 games. Relax.
I just want to chime back in on the tweet here because, this is a point I can't let slip by because it frustrates the heck out of me. You did include some New Jersey teams in your tweet. The Giants and Jets don't play in New York City, Chels.
But they're named after New York.
They're named, but they play in New Jersey. I think the Devils have a right.
Okay, but here's the thing. The Devils are called the New Jersey Devils, right? The Giants and the Jets are called after New York. The reason why they don't play New York is because the stadium is located in New Jersey, but where else would you put the stadium? Honestly, you can't put it in the 5 boroughs. Where else are you gonna put it?
So if you can't put the stadium in New York, maybe we shouldn't call the teams New York.
but they are New York.
Well, this is just about as bad as like the New England Patriots claiming a whole region for their town outside of Boston. That's my take. My take on naming sports teams is you got to pick a place and stick to it.
I mean, that's fair. Also, they're called the New York Giants and the New York Jets. That's my take on that.
Maybe the Devils are just bored. They've only played the one game overseas in the Global Series, and they're just bored.
I mean, maybe my original tweet got 23 retweets and 150 some odd likes, and then the Devils quote tweeted it 274 likes, over 274 retweets. I'm sorry, and over 1,500 likes. The Devils fans came at me, that's for sure. Also, a few of them were tweeting at the Red Bulls, which is fair. NYCFC is doing well. So I left out a couple of MLS teams, which I shouldn't have done. That's fair. I take responsibility where that's where I should have. I should have included them in the tweet, and they are good. And I'm not saying you have to bandwagon on the best team. I never said that. I'm saying all these teams are bad. What team are New York sports fans looking to for I guess support, because everyone else stinks? And some of the responses I got were pretty wild.
Only 78 replies though, so you avoided the ratio. At least for now. For now.
Oh man! And a few days ago, I tweeted out on Chel Squared, you can't be on board with the rebuild year and still be enraged when the team isn't good that same season. Now, this also sort of blew up, 9 retweets and about 80 likes or so. And I tweeted this after the Rangers lost to the Hurricanes 8-5.
It's hard to keep all those losses straight, isn't it?
It's tough. But at the same time, we knew they were rebuilding. Everyone in the league knew this was not going to be a great team. But at the same time, watching them lose 8-5 is not a whole lot of fun, especially against your Carolina Hurricanes.
Yeah, well, I cautioned you this last summer or I guess it was last spring, when Jeff Gorton and Slats came out and announced that it was going to be a full rebuild. I said, coming from a Carolina Hurricanes fan, I just want to warn you that some rebuilds never end. They seemingly go on forever. Although that may be changing now down in Raleigh. There's a light at the end of the tunnel, maybe. They're off to a hot start, obviously.
The Hurricanes are 3-0-1 to start the season, sitting on top of not only the Eastern Conference, but are sitting on top of the NHL standings with the Anaheim Ducks. The Ducks, out of nowhere, are 3-0-1. I don't know what's going on in Anaheim. It's probably mostly just John Gibson, but Anaheim is probably going to regret it sometime soon. But Carolina, 3-0-1. What is going on down in Raleigh?
Well, if you believe the hype, it's the Rod Brind'Amour effect. First year as head coach. He was an assistant under Bill Peters for years. First year as a head coach at any level, aside from Pee Wee, where he coached his son for a while. And it's a totally different culture. He was a guy who's been on staff now. He was an assistant coach under both Paul Maurice, and he survived that firing. Then he was an assistant coach under Bill Peters. And so a lot of Hurricanes fans, while excited because it was a franchise legend, and anyone who's ever played with or worked with Rod Brind'Amour will tell you they'll run through a wall for this guy, it still felt like more of the same when the hiring was announced. But it's not. It's completely different. The culture has changed. They abandoned Bill Peters' moronic decision to have 2 captains last year in Jordan Staal and Justin Falk. They gave it to the man who was always the best man for the job, Justin Williams, and the team is having fun. It's a different culture. You see them after they win on home ice. They do the skull clap. Then they take a mad dash to the end boards and jump in the glass. You saw them against your Rangers.
Unfortunately.
In the Bill Peters era, and even the Paul Maurice era, if the Hurricanes were to give up 2 goals within the first 5 minutes of the game, it was over. They were going to roll over and they were going to die, and that's how it was. This team doesn't quit. They've got an infusion of youth, starting with Warren Fogle, who's come out of nowhere. He called up at the end of last season, scored a few goals, but still wasn't expected to make the roster this year. Came into training camp and really just stole a spot from some of the guys that were expected to make the team. Valentin Zikov's been a healthy scratch. And Fogle has played on a line with Jordan Staal and Justin Williams, and Williams and he have really had some chemistry. Fogle's got 4 points for the first 4 games, 3 goals, and is a stealth Rookie of the Year candidate. And another bit on the youth up front is Andrei Svechnikov, the number 2 overall pick. There was a lot of concern coming out of camp. Well, right now, Rod Brind'Amour's got him on the 4th line. Well, it's not a traditional 4th line. Rod Brindamore is rolling lines 1 through 4, and a lot of times he's double shifting that fourth line, which is Martinook, Wallmark, and Svechnikov right now. When they come out of a TV timeout, he'll put them right back out there. And Wallmark is a guy who's torn up the AHL for Charlotte. Svechnikov, obviously the number 2 overall pick, comes in with a lot of hype and has produced. And Jordan Martinook, acquired in a kind of forgotten deal for Marcus Kruger over the summer, has been on fire as well. He's got 2 goals, which no one was expecting offensive production from him. And then you've got Sebastian Aho leading the way up front, picking up right where he left off. And you add all that up front, which has been the Hurricanes' weakness for a while, in addition to goaltending, to a defense core, which is, for my money, one of the best in the league, if not the best in the league. And it's a formidable group right now. Granted, I know you cautioned Islanders fans about it's just been 3 games. It's just been 4 games. And the teams the Hurricanes have played are not exactly world beaters. The Islanders, Rangers, and Canucks all not expected to be great. But the Columbus Blue Jackets are a team who's routinely in the playoffs. They played Sergei Bobrovsky, and it was a dominating performance. And I would say even the game they lost in overtime to the Islanders, the Hurricanes have outplayed their opponents. It was a bad penalty by Michael Furlan late in regulation. The Islanders score in overtime on a power play. But the Hurricanes have really dominated, and the fact that Rod Brindamore is rolling all 4 lines has helped them late in games. You know, they've outscored opposition. I believe it's 7-1 right now in the third period. And they're a group playing with a lot of confidence.
I mean, the blue line is probably one of the best for sure. Jacob Slavin, Dougie Hamilton, Calvin DeHaan, Justin Falk, Hayden Fleury, and Brett Pesce.
And you leave out there because he was a scratch in the last game, but Trevor Van Riemsdyk right now is the 7th. So that's a group that, it's funny to look at. Are there any other teams in the league where Dougie Hamilton would come in and be the 5th leading guy in ice time? He's the 5th defenseman in ice time right now. He's playing on that top pair with Slavin, but as Hamilton still gets adjusted to the system, they're easing him in. Calvin DeHaan has just been such a steadying presence. I've been very impressed with him coming in, and he's really been just what the doctor ordered to get Justin Falk's game back on track. DeHaan is such a steady presence, doesn't make any mistakes, allows Falk to be a little more aggressive, and Falk has clearly lost some weight over the summer, and he looks quicker. He's been able to keep up with the opposition. And Brett Pesce, who the Hurricanes gave a long-term deal last summer, is now your 5th or 6th defenseman. That's a good problem to have. And for my money, Jacob Slavin, he should be a Norris candidate. I mean, I've said that for a couple of years now. Jacob Slavin is, I believe, one of the most underrated defensemen in the league. And if Dougie Hamilton, and I won't say if, when he finds his game in Carolina, that pair is going to be unstoppable.
Well, where do you rank this blue line then? Because I still think San Jose is probably better because you have the best defenseman in the world in Erik Karlsson. You have Brent Burns, and you have a Canadian Olympian in Marc-Edouard Vlasic. But in terms of the entire league, where would you put Carolina's blue line?
I think it's in the conversation with San Jose, Nashville. Nashville obviously doesn't have the third pair that I think the Hurricanes or the Sharks have. But the top 4, I think it's right up there. Erik Karlsson, obviously, I think is one of the best defensemen in the world. But I again think Slavin is really up there in that conversation. I think he's a top 10 defenseman in the league, no holds barred. So Vlasic, Burns, Karlsson, you mentioned those guys. I mean, you can rotate. Calvin DeHaan has been one of the most impressive pieces for me. And it was kind of an afterthought this offseason. No one really saw the Hurricanes signing him. Once they did sign him, we all kind of assumed that meant Justin Falk was probably on his way out the door. They don't need 5 top 4. And I mean, on a different situation, Calvin DeHaan could be a top pairing defenseman. I think he serves a role similar to what Mattias Ekholm serves in Nashville. Mattias Ekholm is as steady as she goes, lets Ryan Ellis or PK Subban, whoever he's playing with, and right now I believe it's Subban, kind of do their thing, same way Justin Falk has been allowed to do their thing, and really doesn't get the credit that they deserve, DeHaan and Ekholm both. But they are top 4 defensemen right now, and I think in a different situation could each be top pair guys.
I mean, this blue line, I absolutely agree with you. This blue line is incredible, and if this blue line was anywhere except for Carolina, they would be talked about 1,000% more than they are now.
Well, and I think the blue line has been strong in years past, too. Obviously not this strong. You get the addition of both Dougie Hamilton and Calvin DeHaan, and the only exodus this summer is Noah Hannafin, who, and this isn't a knock on Noah Hannafin, he's still very young. He's not either of those players yet. And the Hurricanes were content to say he won't ever be either of these players. And that's why they were ready to move on. And I think, but that being said, the blue line has been solid in the past. Slavin and Pesce always played together. Hannafin and Falk were good. Van Riemsdyk was very solid last year on the third pair. But the downfall had traditionally been goaltending. And so far, the Hurricanes haven't had to face too many issues in the net. Curtis McElhaney, coming over as a waiver claim, has been outstanding in the 2 games he's played. Peter Mrazek was very solid opening night and struggled a little bit against the Rangers, but the offense bailed him out. And Scott Darling is skating again. This morning he was back to practicing, and so he may be returning soon. It's going to be interesting to see what they do with the goaltenders, because we look at the defense, and you can say right away, on paper, this is solid. You look at the goaltenders, there are a lot more question marks, and that's always been a question mark in Carolina, really for this 9-year playoff drought. And it'll be interesting to see what they decide to do once Darling does return to full health.
Well, here's the thing, right? Cam Ward, out of Carolina, going to Chicago, of course, does not look good in Chicago at all, and that's an understatement. He's been looking terribly in Chicago. Can't stop a beach ball for whatever reason. Cam Ward just is not looking good at all. But, I mean, Mrazek is obviously an improvement. McElhaney as a backup is okay with Darling currently out. There's still a question mark in the blue paint. Mrazek is better. Is he capable as a goalie, as a starting goaltender, to lead the Carolina Hurricanes to the playoffs and beyond? I don't know.
And I don't think we will know for a while. And so that's why I think, as excited as Caniacs are right now about the start in the first 4 games and how good they have looked, this weekend's going to be a big test. And I've said publicly I'm going to withhold judgment on this team until I see how they play in this 3-game road trip. They go to Minnesota, then a back-to-back at Winnipeg, and then they get a night off and they're in Tampa Bay. Now you're starting to play the big boys. This isn't no offense again to your Rangers, but this isn't the Islanders, Rangers, and Canucks, who I think everybody's pretty much got penciled into the bottom 5 of the league. You're playing 2 of the top 5 teams in the league for my money, Tampa and Winnipeg, and Minnesota, who's been a playoff team consistently for the last decade. This is going to be the test. And I don't know. Peter Mrazek looked really solid in opening night. Didn't have a great night against the Rangers, and that's been the knock on him his whole career. He's not consistent. 1 year he'll challenge Jimmy Howard for the starting job and win it in Detroit, and the next year they can ship him off to Philadelphia and he's going to be the 3rd goalie there. You don't know what you're getting every night, and that's part of the reason that Peter Mrazek was available this summer for a 1-year deal at $1.5 million.
Well, he gave up the 5 goals against the Rangers the other day, but lucky for him, the Carolina Hurricanes, of course, put up 8 on Rangers backup goalie Georgiev. And Coach Quinn, David Quinn, rookie coach, obviously, out of college, and he was not happy. To put it lightly, this man, I love the way David Quinn is approaching this team right now. Because the thing is, and he said this, and he said this either earlier today or late yesterday. We're recording this Thursday afternoon, by the way, before all the games that have started tonight. He said that it doesn't matter how much you make, and the biggest thing for him is effort. If you are not showing effort, you're gonna sit, and that's what we've seen. He is sitting Neil Pionk and Kevin Shattenkirk today for tonight's game against the San Jose Sharks. He doesn't care who you are. If you are not giving 150% game in and game out, he's gonna sit you. From what I've gathered from these couple weeks so far, and that to me is incredible, because Alain Vigneault would never do that. He would play Tanner Glass every game. He would play Mark Stahl every game, Dan Girardi when he was on the team. I mean, he didn't care. He just didn't care, and the Rangers, I'm so super salty about the 2014 final, because they could have won that series if, 1, that was coached better, and 2, Dwight King got called off. Also, they could have beat the Senators if that was coached well, because that series was a disgrace coaching-wise. They should have beat the Senators very easily, and they didn't, and I'm still very salty about it. But David Quinn, so far, is doing very well. According to the New York Post, in practice a couple days ago, David Quinn was not happy. He was yelling at players to shoot the puck. It's not a beauty contest. Get the puck to the net. David Quinn, big fan of David Quinn so far.
I think that you may be the most impressed by a coach who has never won an NHL game as anyone in history, which I don't have a problem with it. I agree with you. This is a culture change, just like we talked about in Carolina. The fact that now you've got Kevin Shattenkirk, who is, just a year removed from a high-priced free agent deal on July 1, in the press box, in street clothes. And I mean, to be fair, and I can only speak to the game I saw them play in Carolina, Anthony DeAngelo looked very solid. He probably deserves to be in the lineup right now. And I guess this is the luxury you have when you're a rebuilding team. No one should be entitled to anything. If you feel a guy, even if he's high priced, isn't going to give you the best chance to win, sit him. And I mean, we talk about decors. Brady Shea looks better this year. I thought he took a step back last year. Adam McQuaid I've been impressed with, just in the little I've watched. I've watched the Rangers play the Hurricanes and a few other spots. But he's been a solid addition. And so there's a little depth on the back end where, you know what, maybe Kevin Shattenkirk, who I believe is coming off surgery in the offseason, if he needs a night to sit, maybe give it to him. Send a message at the very least.
I mean, Brendan Smith, as we all know, got banished to the AHL last season and now has come back and has reclaimed his roster spot on that blue line, which kind of gives Coach Quinn some mobility on that blue line, because now with Smith being able to play in the NHL again for, I don't know what happened to him last season, but now that he's up to the task again this season, it gives Coach Quinn that flexibility to sit at Shattenkirk, to sit at Pionk, because Smith is there and is once again a presence on the Rangers blue line.
Now, I know one of your big criticisms of Alain Vigneault was that he wouldn't play the kids enough, that he a lot of times gave preference to the veterans.
That's one of my 17 trillion problems with Alain Vigneault, sure.
So, do you think David Quinn has made enough progress in that regard? Obviously, he sits Shattenkirk a veteran, but what about up front?
Well, I really appreciate the fact that Pavel Buchnevich has kind of blossomed so far. Pavel Buchnevich has looked like the forward that the Rangers fans have hoped that he would be for the first few games. He's been everywhere. He's been in front of the net. He's defending well. He's everywhere on the ice. And Buchnevich he was supposed to be this good with Alain Vigneault, and Alain Vigneault would never play him. And whenever Buchnevich, and because of that, Buchnevich kind of lost his confidence and just kind of didn't do as well as perhaps that he could have under a coach that would have believed in him more. Alain Vigneault, from what it looked like, obviously we're not in the dressing room. We don't know what's going on behind closed doors. But from what it looked like during games, Pavel Buchnevich and Alain Vigneault just did not see eye to eye, and Buchnevich just couldn't get out of his shell under Alain Vigneault. Now under David Quinn, you see Pavel Buchnevich go to the dirty areas, give that extra effort. He is really blossoming into the top six winger, top six forward that Rangers fans have hoped and expected him to become, and Buchnevich has looked really good so far.
Well, and I think that speaks again to maybe, you mentioned we don't know what goes on in the locker room, and that reminds me a little bit of the Hurricanes trade of Jeff Skinner, not to bring everything back to the Hurricanes, but it's a similar situation where clearly he didn't get along with the coaching staff, Bill Peters, or, as we later found out, Rod Brindamore. I mean, Rod Brindamore ran the power play in Carolina, and one of the big complaints of Jeff Skinner in Carolina was he turned the puck over too much on the power play. They lamented that forever. And so maybe this is a case where Buchnevich and Vigneault just didn't see eye to eye, and it was never going to work, and so it either needed to be a change of scenery for Buchnevich or a change of coach in New York. And maybe David Quinn's the guy to bring the best out of him.
I mean, you got Brett Howden also came over from the Lightning last season in the huge deal with McDonough, who was actually, I'm wearing a New York Rangers Winter Classic jersey with the patch and all that with Ryan McDonough on the back, which I bought, I think it was like a week or 2 weeks before McDonough got traded. So that's the backstory behind this jersey, which it was tough for me to find to begin with. I waited. I went to the Winter Classic. It was January 1st, and then I got the jersey in the middle of March, so I couldn't find any Winter Classic jersey with the Winter Classic patch on it. I could have found an average Fanatic one without the patch, but I needed the patch. The patch was important to me, and I got the patch. Regardless, you got Brett Howden now, who has looked good. He's a rookie, first couple of games here in New York, and he's looked very solid. And Lias Andersson, who was supposed to make the roster, was sent down instead to the AHL, and the reasoning behind that was, okay, Lias Andersson is too good to be on the fourth line, so instead of that, we'll send him down to Hartford, where he will play first line minutes. Which, I mean, you can make the case for. There's definitely, looking at the top 9 for the Rangers right now, you got Kevin Hayes, Ryan Spooner, Buchnevich. Would you sit Jimmy Vesey for Lias Andersson? I mean, Vesey's looked good. VC has impressed me so far in these couple of games here because, again, under Alain Vigneault, he would show up for a couple of games and just not show up, and then he was very streaky. But so far, in the 3 games that we've seen from Jimmy VC so far, he's looked a lot more comfortable out there on the ice.
Well, I'll say this, as far as sending Anderson down, I understand maybe not wanting to expose a young guy who you really feel is part of your future, part of the core moving forward. You probably don't want to expose them to 10 minutes of ice time a night and a culture of losing, to be frank. If the rebuild is going to work as planned, they're going to lose a lot. And that was one of the problems, again, in Carolina, was a lot of these young guys were entitled to their roster spots coming right out of the draft. Skinner, Hannafin, Lindholm, all these guys come to mind. And then they sit around on the bottom 6 or the bottom pair, and they lose a lot. And eventually losing, it really is contagious. And I don't know if you want to expose a guy who you expect to be a leader, a guy who famously does not like to lose, including not keeping his silver medal. Maybe you don't want to expose him to all this losing right now to the point where he becomes numb to losing. Maybe send him to Hartford. Let him play. Let him get some more experience in the pro game in North America. And hopefully he still has that fire and hunger, and maybe he's got a little even more drive to make the team next year.
I mean, Hedl has looked really good also. I tweeted this out. I mean, granted, it might have been a little premature, but I said, Filip Hedl's a Hall of Famer, don't at me. Listen, might have been a little premature, but Filip Hedl has looked very good. And this kid's like 18, 19 years old. We're both older than him. I'm sad. I need my AARP card. Anyway, that's beside the point. But the Rangers are still looking for their first win. They play San Jose tonight, and if they go 0-4, but the Rangers are the only team in the NHL without a point, besides Edmonton, who has only played 1 game so far. Rangers have played 3, lost all of them, and they are the only team without any points whatsoever. And they look good in some aspects, and then just haven't looked good in other aspects. But Carolina, meanwhile, 3-0-1, not too bad, not too bad at all.
Wait and see. I'll gloat for now, but we could very easily be sitting here next week, and they're sitting at 3-1 after a tough week, and I'm going to look like an idiot, just like I did. But maybe I shouldn't tell your listeners this because they don't listen to me. But I famously said I thought Cam Ward would fare much better once he got out of Carolina, relieved himself of some pressure, and it has not turned out that way. Famously, there's a theory going around, and I think Cam Ward and some other goalies who have played in Carolina have cooked up this theory. And it's not entirely baseless from what I understand, but there is a theory. The Hurricanes are always very high in the analytics, always in the top 5, and they're Corsi or Fenwick. Means they get a lot of shots to the net and don't give up a lot. And the goaltenders, who have always posted poor stats for the Hurricanes, in recent memory at least, have always complained that shots are counted a little, let's say, funnily. Is that a word? Funnily?
We'll make it a word. We'll add it to the dictionary.
It is a funny count of shots in PNC Arena that a lot of times shots that come on from visitors are not counted, and some dump ins from the Hurricanes are counted, maybe to pump those analytic numbers and possession numbers. That was a big key. That was one of the big talking points of Bill Peters and his tenure. And I know a lot of goaltenders feel that if they play for the Hurricanes at home, they don't get credit for as many saves as maybe they made.
Well, here's the thing. There are a lot of statisticians that do these kind of things, right? At the end of the day, if all of them are wrong and these goalies are great, then where are the saves? Give me the saves.
Well, that was my theory, is that Cam Ward, there would be saves coming this year. And so far, not so much.
I mean, listen, you can plug your stuff because, I want everyone to listen to you as well because you have an incredible podcast with the son of John Forsland, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, childhood friend of mine. Matt and I go back a long ways. He's a college hockey player over for NCAA Division III at Lebanon Valley College, doing well down there. And we started a podcast, mainly Carolina Hurricanes stuff, but we do try to get around the rest of the league. And we really like to focus on hockey in the South. Obviously, you know my passion for hockey in quote-unquote non-traditional markets. Growing up in Raleigh, I remember in 2002 when the Hurricanes made their first trip to the final, there was a famous column in Detroit about Motown versus Mayberry and how dare these Hicks come and play in the Stanley Cup final against us. And at its core, that's what Carolina Hurricanes hockey has been. It has been against the grain. We tailgate. People wonder why. It's because we take our culture from NASCAR and college basketball and we bring it to the hockey rink, and it makes for a lot of fun when the team is good.
Right. Well, they haven't been recently.
Well, and that's why you see the arena empty.
Yeah, for sure. Well, the Carolina Hurricanes aren't the only team with question marks at the goalie position right now, because in Pittsburgh, Matt Murray is 24 years old, hasn't looked good in the couple of games that he's played so far, and now he's out with a concussion. His third concussion. He's only 24 years old. Hasn't even peaked yet from a physical perspective. He hasn't, usually players peak around the age 26, 27. For goalies especially, they're late bloomers. Matt Murray's 24, third concussion so far. So that off the bat is very scary for both Matt Murray and for the Pittsburgh Penguins, because their two other goalies are Casey DeSmith and Tristan Jarry, who are just question marks. More than anything else, we can't, there's no real, he's really good or really bad, because there's just not enough of a sample size to say definitively one way or the other. But Casey DeSmith and Tristan Jarry, there are, some fans are hopeful that they can at least hold down the fort a la Malcolm Subban in Vegas style last year. But if they don't, there is a huge problem in Pittsburgh. The thing is that I talked about this last week on the show, Pittsburgh's blue line is very questionable, because if Chris Letang goes down, the whole blue line's in shambles, because they're going to play Jack Johnson on the first line, on the first pairing, and that's never going to end well, because he's not good at all. Or Justin Schultz and Brian Dumoulin, great first pairing, and then you have not a whole lot more. So if Chris Letang is out. So even with that blue line, you take Murray out of the equation. Pittsburgh, are they content to score 8 goals a game? Are they going to go the Toronto Maple Leafs route of winning every game 9-8? Like what are the Penguins going to do?
Well, I think it raises a question more so. I mean, the Metro is really wide open. And you mentioned Tristan Jarry has played sparingly. I think he's got somewhere south of 30 career games, save percentage around .907. Unproven. Casey DeSmith, also unproven. And to be frank, Matt Murray, ever since Marc-Andre Fleury was exposed in the expansion draft, the pressure has been solely on Murray's shoulders. He doesn't have a reliable safety valve anymore. They added Antti Niemi last year trying to shore that up. It didn't work in Pittsburgh. And Matt Murray, there are some question marks there. Is he reliable enough to take you a full 82 during the regular season? And if he struggles, where do you turn? We look at a situation like St. Louis last year. You have Jake Allen, and he's just a head case. The game goes down the toilet. But at that point, they have reliable backups to help him out. They added Chad Johnson this summer. We'll see how that will work after Carter Hutton left for Buffalo. But Carter Hutton was able to bail out Jake Allen. There isn't that guy in Pittsburgh. And I thought that was what made some of the offseason moves puzzling, is I thought there would be an addition. I know they like Tristan Jarry a lot. And he came up in some trade talks around the league for teams looking for goaltending. And so I know they like Tristan Jarry and don't want to see him play another year in the AHL. But you don't have a veteran presence behind Matt Murray. And at some point, and I'll ask you this, is it time to revisit the expansion draft decision to expose Marc-Andre Fleury rather than Matt Murray? I know at the time, Matt Murray just won his second Stanley Cup. But you look at it, Marc-Andre Fleury just led a team to the Stanley Cup Finals, was outstanding in the regular season again, and Pittsburgh has struggled under Matt Murray.
Didn't do so well in the final with the onslaught of the Capitals, but he did
fair, but he got
very
there, right?
well. Very
and
well.
The regular
otherwise.
Season was outstanding for Fleury last year, and it hasn't started great for him. But Matt Murray's regular season, this isn't just based on last year's playoffs, was substandard for what they were expecting out of him. And I think part of that is the pressure of, Marc-Andre Fleury was Sidney Crosby's best friend, and you're the reason he just got shipped out of town. Now go play and win us some games. And I don't know if Matt Murray was ready for that last year. I thought maybe this year, after a summer of preparation and getting adjusted to being the number one, he would be a little more prepared to take on that role. And maybe he is, and we're just not going to find out for a little while because of another concussion.
I mean, Marc-Andre Fleury didn't have to be shipped out. He waived his no-move clause to go to Las Vegas. So at the end of the day, keeping Marc-Andre Fleury what would they have done last season and this season? Would they have won the Cup? I mean, we don't know. Would they have won the Cap series? I mean, Matt Murray played decently well in that series, and Marc-Andre Fleury, while he's a good goaltender, is he a Lundqvist? Is he a top 5 goalie? No. So at the end of the day, the Caps probably still would have won that series. And if you look at it now, I mean, Marc-Andre Fleury, sure, he's a veteran presence and this and that, but is he a top 5 goalie? No. So at the end of the day, when you have two goalies that are around the same talent level, looking back from before the draft perspective, when you have two goalies that are vying for the number 1 spot, and you have a young Matt Murray coming from the woodworks and taking over the top spot, you kind of had to waive Marc-Andre Fleury. If let's say Vegas didn't take Marc-Andre Fleury and then they would have taken Mrazek or some other goalie, then there could be a great discussion about that, but that didn't happen. They took Fleury and then they went to the final. But as it is, Marc-Andre Fleury, while he is a veteran presence, I mean, he's not the best goalie in the league. So that kind of argument, it makes sense from a veteran's perspective, from an experience perspective, but he's not Patrick Waugh. He's not a Brodeur. To Penguins fans, they might look at him like one, but on paper his stats aren't as good as they are. So he's not as good of a goalie overall. Is he a great goalie? I mean, yeah, he's a pretty solid goaltender, but he's not the best.
Revisiting, because I want to pivot very quickly, because I've bugged you about this a lot now. But why don't the Rangers trade Hank Lundqvist? Why don't they just trade? I would love to see him get a chance to go win a cup in a place, I don't know, maybe if UC Saros isn't ready in Nashville. Make a little Pekka Rinne for Hank Lundqvist swap. The contract
I just
a little
threw up
easier.
in my mouth, man. There's no way. First of all, I don't like Pekka Rinne as a goaltender.
Well,
I don't like
him.
him.
You're rebuilding. Let him allow some goals.
Second of all, even if the Rangers did want to trade Henrik Lundqvist, he says this every year that he doesn't want to leave. There's no, he has a no move clause, so it's up to him ultimately. And he is vehemently denied any want to get out of New York. So even if Gorton wanted to get rid of Lundqvist, and if he wanted to trade him or flip him or do whatever, he couldn't do that unless he basically pried the no move clause out of Lundqvist's hands. So, but the thing is that Lundqvist is obviously still a great goalie, and the team is bad, so his numbers aren't going to be as good. That's going to happen no matter what here. But at the end of the day, Henrik Lundqvist is still Henrik Lundqvist, and if nothing else, even if he doesn't play, let's say Georgiev takes over the starting position. Obviously, that's not going to happen, and Lundqvist is obviously still a starter. But let's say, hypothetically, Lundqvist takes the role of the backup. At the end of the day, Lundqvist is still the de facto captain of the team. The Rangers don't have a captain. Lundqvist is the captain. You would be hard-pressed for someone to deny that, because there's no C on the ice, but everyone knows Lundqvist has it. So to trade him, he doesn't want to be traded, and you can't trade him if he doesn't want to be traded. He won't, because he won't move. He won't waive his no move clause. But let's say he does, and he gets moved somewhere for a chance to win the cup or whatever, then that'll deeply affect the Hedels, the Howdens, the Andersons, the Pionks of the Rangers, where that's the biggest presence in, not only on the team, that's the biggest presence in New York. So you trade Henrik Lundqvist, you trade a much more than just a player.
Yeah. Well, and I think one thing to watch, you have a much more impassioned defense than I'm willing to prepare. I think now I'm convinced you probably should keep Hank Lundqvist. But one thing that I think is interesting is we see all these high-scoring games early every year, but especially this year after the goaltending equipment adjustment was made. I'm interested to see how many of these numbers revert back, or if this equipment issue really is going to expose some guys who maybe are not as technically sound and are more what a lot of guys just call blockers. So forever, I've said James Reimer is just a blocker. He gets out, he gets in good position, and he hopes the puck hits him. And a lot of times it does. But when the equipment gets smaller, maybe more pucks fail to hit him when you don't have the larger chest protector. So I'm interested to see if any goaltenders that are starters and highly thought of are exposed as we go forward here.
Well, I don't know if you've noticed this or not, but I've watched as many hockey games as I could Especially because we're in school. We don't have a whole lot of time to sit around and watch hockey as much as we would like to. But I've seen a lot of goals that aren't goals become goals. First of all, a couple of these goals, keep your stick down. If you're going down to the butterfly, keep your stick in between your legs. You've learned this in Pee Wee. Please, I grew up playing hockey. I'm not on the team because I'm not good anymore. I was never good to begin with, but I played hockey. I was taught this when I first got on the ice with my goalie equipment. Keep your stick between your legs at all times. Never raise it above ice level, pretty much ever. Some of these goals that go through 5-hole, it bothers me so badly when these just 5-hole goals just slide on through. And it's not just 5-hole goals that I've seen. It catches the jersey or the between the arm and it squeaks through, or just these bad angle goals, or just goals that goaltenders should have. You're playing in the best league in the world. Probably should have a lot of these goals, and they haven't for some reason, whether it's the equipment thing or I don't know what. But there are some goals, obviously not in all games, but there's been a few very distinct goals in the past few days that just shouldn't be goals, and yet somehow they're finding their way in the back of the net.
And again, it's a lot of stuff. I think it's early season. Guys are getting back used to it. Over the summer, they were skating in the beauty league or whatever, and it's not exactly the highest pace, and they're not facing NHL shots and NHL action. So a lot of that will maybe work itself out. But I do think the equipment issue and the reduction in equipment size is playing more of a role than maybe people give it credit.
Well, you have to think about it from a goaltender's perspective, right? These goaltenders have played their entire careers with a certain style of protection. And now they have to adjust on the fly, basically, because I've read that the reduction happened in August. So and then preseason started 2 weeks later?
Yep.
So the turnaround to get these players ready for the season was extremely short. And when you do that, you don't think about the goaltenders at all, because it does take a while for them to get comfortable in this equipment. So when you do that, when you say, okay, well, let's take some chunks out of here, some chunks out of there, it doesn't. And you do that in August when the preseason starts, and then you go to the regular season soon after. You don't give the goaltenders enough opportunity to get set, to fix, now that there's no padding in one particular area, okay, let me adjust, let me fall this way, or let me protect the puck this way. You don't give them enough chance to kind of work with what they've got now, and that's what it leads to. It leads to these awkward goals that shouldn't be goals, but goaltenders just aren't prepared enough to deal with their changing equipment.
Well, and it leads to final scores like 7-4 and 7-6,
right,
like we've seen the Maple Leafs play as of late. And their high-scoring affairs, that Rangers-Hurricanes game ends 8-5. It's just a lot of high-scoring games early in the season, and I'm interested to see if that continues.
Well, one team that just hasn't looked out of place at all, even though a lot of people have been saying, the Hangover, or, they just won the Cup, Hangover, all this and that. The Washington Capitals are looking like a playoff team already. It is October 11th. There's only the first couple of games here. Not a whole lot has been done. But at the end of the day, the Washington Capitals, who are 2-0-1, they play tonight at New Jersey. The Capitals have looked like that they just won the Cup yesterday. That they haven't stopped playing. They haven't looked out of place with Todd Reirden now at the head coaching position now with Trotz on Long Island. They haven't looked out of place at all. Holtby has looked fantastically. By the way, thank you to Holtby because he's also on my fantasy team. Much appreciated. Holtby has looked really good. Everyone has looked really good. What hangover? They don't have one.
Yeah, well, I mean, you look at the group as a whole. Obviously, there's a change in the head coaching position. What else did they lose?
Not a whole lot.
Philip Grubauer goes to Colorado, and they lose their fourth-line center to Vancouver. Aside from that, it's the same roster that won a cup last year. And so I said over the summer, right after they won the cup, I thought this could go one of two ways. They are either going to party their tails off all summer and come back and say, we won, it's over, the chase is done, we finally reached it, and this would be a sloppy, even if it's successful, a sloppy regular season. The other way this could go is the weight is finally off our backs. We've done it, and now we're world beaters. We are champs, and we're going to play with reckless abandon. Because what are they going to tell us now? What are they going to say? You've never won the big one? We did. We did it. And it appears that that's what Todd Reirden's got the guys doing. He's got them out flying. I mean, they look quick. I expected the first month of the season, even if they did have that attitude, they were going to look a little sluggish, and the summer was definitely going to have taken its toll. They look fast. And it looks like a team poised to, win the Metro again and make another deep run. I'll be interested to see, though. Anytime there's a first-year coach, and this extends across the league in Carolina, Washington, New York, wherever, what happens when the first little sniff of adversity hits? What happens when things get tough? Because right now things have gone swimmingly. The Caps win big opening night in Boston. They follow that up the night after. They go to Vegas last night and get a win. What happens when they lose 3 in a row? When maybe they're still playing well, but the puck's not going in the net. How does the team respond then? Do they get tight, or do they just stick to the system? And I think that's when we're really going to get a judgment on a lot of these teams.
Yeah, I mean, the Capitals, from what it appears to be, because Todd Reirden, is a quote-unquote new head coach. I mean, he's been with the Caps for a long time now. He was Barry Trotz's right-hand man for a while. So I think for the Caps, this is a unique situation because while Todd Reirden is a quote-unquote new coach, he's been with them for a while. He has a ring with them. He knows the guys. I mean, for the most part, besides Dmitry Yashkin and Nick Dowd, let's say, right? But everybody else he knows. He's comfortable with them. He knows their strengths, their weaknesses for the most part. And at the end of the day, because Todd Reirden is a Capitals coach, he's not coming from Winnipeg. He's not coming from college. He's not coming from a different environment. He knows this team and how they operate. Because this is going on in Washington, I think, let's say they do win 3 in a row, I don't think that's going to be a problem for Washington because Reirden knows what buttons to push and what not to push. I mean, time will tell, obviously, because Reirden could not work out at all, and then the Caps could burn out, and then we could have a different conversation about this, in May or June or whatever. But for now, from what it looks like, Todd Reirden is doing everything that he can to, one, maintain the chemistry that they had last season, but also push the right buttons now in his first year leading the team.
Well, there were 2 teams that hired assistant coaches to be their head coaches and just promoted them up the bench. And those were my Carolina Hurricanes and the Washington Capitals. And they're 2 very different situations. The Hurricanes, it's a mass exodus. We want totally new culture. Everything needs to be different. And so that assistant coach, Rod Brindamore, doesn't really carry on the legacy of Bill Peters. In Washington, it's different. The only guys that leave are Philip Grubauer and Jay Beagle. So Todd Reirden is really just preserving the culture that they already had. And I think that's a much easier position for him to be in because he doesn't have to change who he is or the message he's been sending for years. He knows this works, and he can point to the players and say, you know this works. You saw the success we can have if you do it my way. So buy in. And I think that's a powerful asset for a new coach to have.
For sure. I mean, speaking of the Carolina Hurricanes, I put out the poll question today on Twitter at Chel Squared. If you want to vote, you should head on over, give the account a follow, and vote next week. The poll question for today's show is, how many points will the Carolina Hurricanes realistically have after the end of the regular season? Now, the 4 options were less than 85, 85 to 90, 90 to 95, and over 95. Now, the less than 85 had 20%. 85 to 90 had 48% of the votes. Over 50 people voted on this poll. 90 to 95 had 26% of the vote, and only 6% said over 95 points. Ford, I can read your expression right now. You are not happy with the results of this poll. What do you think?
Listen, I'm going to get myself in trouble because I am normally very cynical, and some Caniacs do not like me for that. So I'm going to say this. I can see this team getting over 95 points, but if they're the Carolina Hurricanes I know and love, and if they fall back into the same trap they have for the past decade, and are the same team we've seen for the 9-year drought, they will be in the hunt till December, fall apart in January, be totally out of the race in February, and then mount a pathetic little attempt where we all convince ourselves, well, there's a chance, and they'll get somewhere in that 85 to 90 point range. If this team is truly changed and the culture truly is different, there's no I could see this team being a 100-point team. Forget 95 being the threshold. They've got a legit 20-year-old, 21-year-old Sebastian Aho who's got the talent to be an MVP in this league someday. And he's scoring at a rocket pace right now with Teuvo Teravainen in his line. Like we said, that D-core is as good as it gets. And if they just figure out the goaltending and the youth movement continues, doesn't hit any snags, this is not only a playoff team, this is a team who I think can compete to win the Metro in the regular season.
Right now or in next season or 2 years from now?
I think they could make the jump this year. And in Carolina, any Hurricanes fan knows we all like to look back on 2006. Coming into that year, it was out of the lockout, so a little different situation, but it was a team that had finished at the bottom of the league for years. They're predicted to finish 30th that year, or 29th or 30th that year. And they came out and set the world on fire, and no one really saw it coming. It was a start similar to this. They lost their first game, but then went on to win, I believe it was 6 of the next 7. And they didn't look back. It was a new attitude under a new coach, Peter Laviolette, at that time. So there are a lot of similarities Caniacs are drawing on here. Do we see the same end result? I doubt it. But I don't know. I see the talent on this roster to cross that 100-point threshold as soon as this year. I also see the same old Carolina Hurricanes that could fall apart by February. So again, like I said, I'm going to be doing a lot of judgment after the next 3 games.
My biggest concern with the Hurricanes, and I voted for the 90 to 95 range, is the goaltending. The goaltending to me is the biggest problem, the biggest question mark for Carolina by far. We've seen from these past few games that Carolina can score goals and they can defend well. The only question now becomes, can Peter Mrazek, can Curtis McElhaney, can Scott Darling, can they hold down the fort well enough to propel the Hurricanes to a playoff spot? Now, 95 points could still land you in the playoffs, especially with this Metro division that Rangers are bad, the Islanders are going to be bad, the Penguins are a question mark right now with Matt Murray out, and the blue line is also questionable. Obviously, they're probably still going to make playoffs because, Crosby and Malkin and everybody else.
Do we think the Devils are good? That's what I said earlier. I think this Metro is wide open for a team. I think Washington, Pittsburgh, Columbus, Philadelphia, and Carolina are all in a similar range right now, and I think they're contenders.
The Devils, by the way, have played one game. They've won it against Edmonton in Germany, I believe it was. And that tweet got me so many Devils fans in my mentions saying the Devils are great. First of all, I didn't say anything about the Devils. Said nothing about the Devils in that tweet. And you played one game and you won it. Sure, that's fair. I'll give it to you. You played one game. Can we, if I tweeted that, in January and you were leading the Metro, then you would have a case. You played one game. Can we relax?
Andrew says relax. I'm going to print a t-shirt.
Relax. That's all I'm saying. We played one game. But, the Devils are a team that can surprise people. If Schneider can play as well as he knows how to, if Taylor Hall can be the MVP again, if all of these things, if Nico Hischier finally breaks out and starts producing more, then we'll see a powerful Devils team.
And that's what we've said about a lot of these Metro teams, though. If the goaltending holds up for Carolina, if Taylor Hall's MVP again, if Washington doesn't face a Stanley Cup hangover, which doesn't look like they are, in Philadelphia, if the new guys click and that goaltending holds up, there are a lot of ifs. The if in Pittsburgh with Matt Murray. And that's why I think this Metro, we could be surprised at the end of the year of how this lines up.
You look at the Devils right now, you have the top line of Taylor Hall, Nico Hischier, and Kyle Palmieri. That's a good line. At the same time, you look at the blue line, Mirko Mueller is not a good defenseman. He is I mean, if you look at his analytics, he is legitimately one of the worst defenders in the entire league. And I'm not saying that as a Rangers fan. I'm not saying that, because the Devils tweeted me or whatever. Like, statistically, if you look at Mirko Mueller objectively, he is one of the worst defenders in the league. Sami Vatanen, obviously a great defender. They got him in the Henrique trade. That was an interesting trade at the time, still is. Andy Green, is Andy Green still good enough to hold down the fort? I mean, he is still the captain, if I'm not mistaken. So is Andy Green capable enough to hold down the blue line? Will Butcher is better than we thought he would be, honestly. And you got Ben Lovejoy who's holding down the fort as well, Damon Severson. But they're really, besides Sami Vatanen, there's no top 2 staple on that blue line. There's a lot of top 4s and top 6s on that blue line. Sami Vatanen is a top two, maybe top 3 defenseman if you really want to go there. But Mirko Mueller does not deserve to be on the roster, and he's playing a lot of minutes. So there's that going for New Jersey as well. Corey Schneider. There's
big question mark.
Yeah, he's also injured right now, so he's not playing either. So the goalies right now are Keith Kincaid, who has shown up a lot of the times. He also hasn't shown up a lot of the time, so you don't really know what you get with Keith Kincaid either. And Eddie Lack, who you saw play in Carolina for a little bit, and he likes to not show up either. So
Laco Taco is a character. I fully enjoyed the Eddie Lack experience, but I don't know if that's who you want backstopping your playoff chances.
Eddie Lack, he's definitely a character. We see him on social media a lot, and Eddie Lack is definitely a guy that you would love to have in your friend group. But if you want to have Eddie Lack backstopping you to the playoffs,
question mark. I'd say my biggest concern with the Devils is the secondary scoring.
Yeah,
I really like Miles Wood, another prep school guy. Travis Zajac is good, but I don't see a whole lot of production coming outside of that top line of Hall, Heischer, and Palmieri. I just don't see a lot more there, and I don't know if Hall's performance from last year is sustainable. I have serious questions. If I were a betting man, I would have the Devils out of the playoffs.
But are you a betting man? That's the question.
Well, I have made predictions. I have not placed a bet because I have learned that I'm not very smart. So I would lose a lot of money. Last year, as an example, I thought it was time for the Coyotes and Sabres to make the jump.
Ooh.
And was... once the Coyotes lost their first 16 or whatever it was,
Sabres.
I really realized. I thought last year would be the jump for Jack Eichel. I'm not jumping on the bandwagon again. I think they did not do enough this summer. I am back in on the Coyotes bandwagon, though. I have them back in.
The Coyotes, first of all, didn't score a goal until their third game, I believe it was, if I'm not mistaken. So, and even then, it was very close, and they just barely won against Anaheim in the shootout. But the Coyotes did more this season than they previously did, and Arizona last season should have been better than they were. But Buffalo, you bet on the Sabres to make the playoffs last year?
I told you, I'm not very smart. I like to take risks. I'm not very smart. Sometimes I get them right. I had Nashville taking the leap to the finals the year they did when not many people saw it, and a lot of times, much more frequently, I get them wrong, like saying the Sabres wouldn't get the number 1 overall pick and they would actually be in the playoffs.
Nashville almost won the Cup that year until Pekka Rinne decided not to show up in Pittsburgh a couple of times.
Sure you don't want to trade for him?
I'm pretty sure. I've ragged on him a few times. Also, by the way, I've ragged on Robin Lehner multiple times in the show, and then he comes in against the Sharks and posts a shutout. So what do I know? I guess who knows? Anyway, this has been incredible. This has been an awesome show. We are both of us are in the same room. We're live. No Skype. No nothing like that. We are both in the same room, sharing the same mic, sharing my microphone. And this has been awesome and really productive conversation, honestly. And talk to you again real soon.
Well, I appreciate you having me on, and I am now going to stake my claim that I am only coming on when the Carolina Hurricanes are in first place in the NHL.
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I don't. I mean, Ford's laughing about it. He's confident in his team. I don't know about that, because if the Carolina Hurricanes are gonna fall, or let's say they're second best in the league, then he's not gonna come on either, and that's also a problem. So talk to me about your social media. Talk to me about your podcast. Where can people follow you?
Yeah, you can follow me at Ford Hatchett. That's FordHattchetT on Twitter, Instagram, wherever I'm around. And then you can follow the podcast at Bar Southeast, BARSOUTHEAST. We do game recaps for the Hurricanes, and then we try to get out a podcast about once a month during the season, recapping everything going on in hockey with a little Southeast twang. So I appreciate you having me on, though, Chel.
Absolutely, and that's an incredible name, honestly. Bar Southeast. That is.
It was gift wrapped for us.
That's a unique name. How did you come up with that name?
Well, we're not very clever, so we thought of hockey terms and said Bar South, and we really miss the old Southeast Division when one of Tampa Bay, Florida, Carolina, Washington, or Atlanta would have to get into the playoffs in the years when none of those teams were good. And so we wanted to pay a little ode to our fallen division now that we're in the Metropolitan.
Oh, that's incredible. Ford, thank you so much for coming on, and I'll talk to you again real soon.
Sounds good.
As always, I'm Andrew Chel, Ford Hatchett, of course, on for this week, and I'll talk to you again next week.